r/AskReddit. How have you cheated death? When I was still a fetus, my mother suffered a heavy injury to her stomach, causing the death of my twin, but I survived somehow. The doctors basically told her she must stay bedridden for the rest of the pregnancy or else she would lose me too. So my grandma got her a SNES, and she just played video games all day. I still have that SNES. In 1977, while I was rushing to catch a bus, a man stopped me for change of $1 to use a payphone. I gave him change, missed my bus, and minutes later it was in a horrible highway accident. I had a screening for something else, and my doctor found very early stage cancer at age 34. It was removed painlessly and completely in an afternoon. It's a cancer that usually affects people over 60 and doesn't have symptoms until it's too late. If I didn't have this other screening, I likely would have died a painful death from it in 10ish years. When the doctor first called to give me the results, he said it was divine intervention and never gave me the results of the test I came in for. I got in an accident with a drunk driver. Everyone that saw the car afterwards said the same thing. How are you alive? The roof where I was sitting was damn near touching the seat. I couldn't have fit back in there if I tried. I got pretty ducked up, for sure, but thankfully I didn't die. I, unknowingly, had a UTI. Never really had one before, but I was always told the symptoms were things like dark urine, pissing blood, being itchy. I had none of them. I was trying to tough guy it out, but I had pain in my stomach for at least 5 days and I decided to go to urgent care because I couldn't eat or walk anymore. They thought my appendix had ducking blown, so they sent me to the ER, but it was a UTI about 24 hours away from going septic and infecting other organs. I felt pretty ducking stupid, but at the same time I had no symptoms other than pain. Shit's scary. Was supposed to be the passenger in my mum's little car when it was T-boned and that side flattened. Ran directly off a cliff in the night in a snowstorm, flipped in the air while falling, and landed 25 feet below in deep soft snow, face up, head point down slope, not knowing what happened. The forgotten timer set on my phone for a covered test went off in my pocket as I was about to make a turn. The sound so startled me that I slammed on the brakes just as a large truck ran the light and cut through my lane where it would have hit me head on. My mum's cat saved my life. Was sleeping on my mum's couch after a breakup. The cat got sick and the vet determined it was carbon monoxide poisoning from the front room gas fireplace. Went into the hospital because my migraines developed weird symptoms, body numbness, which caused them to do a full stroke workup. Found an aneurysm that was going to blow doing those scans. So migraines saved my life. My BO father punched my mom in the stomach 9 weeks before I was due. A few days later she was feeling just a little off and called her doctor, who told her to go to the hospital. It turns out the placenta had ruptured and the surgeon said we both would have died that day had she just decided to sleep it off instead. One very emergency C-section later and we both made it, if not a little undercooked. My cousin and I were sitting on the back of a houseboat when we were little. All the adults were inside, as adults were in the 80s. After a while we stumbled inside instead of falling asleep at the back of the boat. We had carbon monoxide poisoning. Had to be rushed to the hospital. Grandpa bought a new boat motor the next day. In 2019, I had an ex-boyfriend hire a hitman to kill me. He emptied his entire clip out on me, and I was shot once behind my back, and it punctured my lung. I was rushed to the ER. I was set on a table while the nurses and doctors tried to revive me. I remember at one point everything stopped hurting, and I was just feeling really at peace and slowly drifting off. They kept putting warm blankets on me because my body was getting cold, but I wasn't cold. My body was simply shutting down. When they realized that one of the doctors stabbed me with a giant needle and that she hurt so much, I started feeling all the pain from the shooting again. A couple more minutes and I would have been completely gone. Survived a bear attack. Survived being lost at sea for 4 days on a fishing boat. Ran out of gas. No land in sight. Walked away from falling out of a 2-story window when I was like 4 or 5. Walked away from crashing my motorcycle into a guardrail. Walked away from my friend's 300Z XTT crashing through trees and splitting in half. Think that's about it. 5 years ago I went tandem skydiving. After about 30 seconds the dude pulled the parachute, but it wasn't opening. After pulling on the ropes a bit he got his knife and cut the chute, then pulled the second one. By the time the second one was fully inflated we were almost on the ground and landed somewhere in a field instead of the small airport we were supposed to land. They had to pick us up by car. Safe to say I'm never going skydiving again. I was hit by a drunk driver while I was riding my bike at 13. If I hadn't been wearing my helmet, I would have died. The helmet was cracked all the way through on the back. Safety equipment has never been a joke to me since, and all any of my nieces or nephews need to do is call me saying they need a new helmet and they'll have one. Not sure if this counts, but many years ago I was riding home from our local dirt jumps on my BMX. Behind my house is a quarry which has a really rocky bridleway running down the hill. This is the route I would usually take to get home from the jumps. Anyway, I was heading home while the sun was setting and was absolutely blasting it down this rocky path. I jumped off of one of the rocks, and while I was in the air, I watched my front wheel drop out from my forks, and before I knew it, they had pummeled straight into the ground, sending me straight over the handlebars. I flew a good 20 to 30 feet and landed on a big rock right on my spine. I wasn't wearing a helmet at the time, but fortunately I was wearing my backpack which cushioned my landing. I walked away in shock, but completely unscathed apart from a small graze on my knuckles. I have never felt so lucky to be wearing a backpack in my life. Without it I'd certainly have been paralyzed or worse. I was riding a motorbike at 60 miles per hour, national speed limit road. An oncoming car overtook a car on a blind bend and forced me off the road. The moment my bike hit the grass, I decided to jump off it as I was heading for a stone wall and knew that I would never be able to get control of the bike once it was off a tarmac road. The bike pummeled into the wall and I hit the floor with force. My leathers and helmet saved me from a much worse fate, but I think if I'd have hit the oncoming car or the wall, I'd have been dead instantly. I was on my way to stay with friends and my aerosol deodorant exploded in my rucksack and my visor completely detached from my helmet. Went into a coma from pneumonia that turned my blood septic and woke up 2 days later. The doctors didn't think I would wake up. I was hung with a rope and ripped my ear off to get out. When they execute you, they use a hangman's noose for a reason. Put in a CD at a stoplight and the stereo kept spitting it back out. In my focus to get it to work I didn't see the light turn green. Just as the guy behind me honked a car and the red light at full speed and hit the cars that went beside me when the light turned green. The guy behind me didn't move, even when the traffic cleared. I'm going to need the hanging story. When I was around 8 or 9 my mom's boyfriend beat the snot out of me and apparently wasn't satisfied, so he put a rope around my neck, threw one end over a rafter in the shed, lifted me till I had to stand on my tiptoes, and beat me with a piece of cedar that was close by. I can remember the smell. You see, you have to make a choice. Protect your ribs and stomach, face, or try to hold the rope, because every time your legs give out, or you grab yourself in pain you choke. At some point, I lost consciousness, but regained it as I was choking, and in my panic to breathe, I thrashed and was able to get out of the rope. I think the blood provided some lube. I was also able to pull at the rope with the one arm that worked. Thankfully, he stopped when I stopped moving and walked away. Otherwise, I would have probably died. The toll broken jaw, eye socket, ribs, arm, hands, and fingers, some other stuff I can't remember, and a ton of stitches. I spent almost 2 months in the hospital, wore a halo for a long time, and had several reconstructive surgeries. I think I have some PTSD or some other shit from that one too. Congenital heart failure. I was a competitive swimmer growing up, and misdiagnosed by many doctors for many years. I was 2 months away from my mitral valve completely closing and suffering from complete heart failure by age 9. Luckily, a cardiologist found it after a last-ditch effort to try to figure out what was going on, and passing out in my last pool. Scheduled for a rush surgery, had mitral valve replaced. Am alive. Thankful for cardiologists. Get your heart checked. No she there I was, Afghanistan 15 minutes till midnight. Me and another guy were standing outside on guard duty. Every 2 hours you're supposed to get in the Humvee and run the engine. So the battery didn't die due to the onboard computer that was always on. 2 minutes after we get in, are doing the radio checks etc and boom, RPG hits exactly where we were standing. I'm sure they were aiming for the Humvee. Oh what a night. My high school resource officers, SRO, stopped a school shooting with literally less than seconds to spare. I was walking past the kid as he was at his locker pulling the gun. I saw the student get tackled. If the SRO had not stopped the student I would likely have been first, since we were the only students in that hallway. I was at a stop sign and saw a car swerve to miss another car and head straight for me. Seatbelt laws weren't a thing yet and I jumped across the center console and grabbed the passenger door handle just as he hit my car's driver's side door. I flew back across the car and into the driver's side door which had been pushed in halfway across the driver's seat. I have fallen off moving car going at 100 km/h twice. I was a child with neglectful parents not using a seatbelt with unlocked doors. I was lucky to not die or break some bones. One day my mom was telling me to tie my shoelaces and I was telling her I won't. We kept on arguing until I finally stopped to tie them. Seconds later a huge bucket of paint, dropped and exploded right in front of me. It fell from a 12-story building. If I kept walking without tying my shoelaces, I'd probably be dead. Fell through a hatch that hadn't been secured on a roof while fitting skylight windows. Would have fell about 6 floors to my death. If the scaffold hadn't been put up on the side of the building that day, I landed on the scaffold, broken hip and ankle. Got really lucky. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.